And with that, Miss Lynda Austin.
Good morning. Real loud. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's it. It's a beautiful day out, and people will tend to say, oh, it's like a small crowd today. You know what? My firm belief has always been, and my intention has always been, that those who are meant to be here will be here. So you guys are really special, because you were meant to be here today. I actually have one individual who said, I don't know why I'm here. And I almost laughed because it happens all the time. You know, I had one woman one day say, well, I was just walking by and I saw the sign and then I thought, I have to go in there. So that's what happens when you're not attached to what you think it should look like. I used to be, when I first started speaking and working and doing workshops and stuff, I used to have all these ideas about how I could have like huge mobs of people. And then one day I had huge mobs of people. And I realized they weren't my people. They weren't the people who needed to be there, that spoke my language. And so my intention ever since then has been, anytime I'm coming to a workshop or an event or something, I drive here with the intention that the people I meet today are going to be the people who are coming because I have something you want. So if you go home disappointed, don't worry, because I've actually had people call me a week later and say, I didn't really get it when I was there on Sunday, but now I know what you were talking about. So I trust that you're here because you were called here, and I know I certainly was called to be here. The theme for this month is the power of emotion. And as an example of how we can get caught up in our own self-doubt and self-judgment and expectations, from the time I got the email from Gary that said that was the theme for the month, I have been thinking, oh wow, what am I going to say? And my son pointed out to me, Mother, you never know what you're going to say when you get over there, even if you have it all planned out, because you get up there and you open up and something else altogether comes out. And that's pretty much true. So last night, I still did not even have a nail to hang anything on about the power of emotions. And I'm going online and I'm looking up emotions, and I'm looking up quotes on emotions and all this sort of stuff. And my son, who is my own personal Yoda, looks at me and said, what do you want this experience to be for them? I said, well, I'd like it to be joyful. And he said, stop right there. What's the name of your website? Well, my website is Follow Joy. He said, what do you talk about all the time when you're coaching people? Well, I talk about joy. He goes, did you get the picture here that you're the person to talk to them about joy? And all of a sudden, it all made sense. Because I have been an advocate for joy for the last 30 years. It started when I did a reading for a woman, and she asked, what kind of work should I look for? And my source, which I refer to as Essence, said, and I'm sitting there hearing this, she said, don't look for work, you'll find it. Great, I love that quote. Don't look for work, you'll find it. Look for joy. And she began to talk about joy, and ever since then, it's been so clear to me that that's what we're here for. I'm a big believer in a lot of things that Einstein said, and one of the things he said is time is a construct, which means that everything that happens is happening right now. The only moment that's real is right here, right now. Joy is the emotion that's only available to you in the moment. Happiness, contentment, excitement, all of those emotions are tied to either something that has happened, oh, I'm so happy because my daughter came to visit me, or oh, I'm so thrilled that my sister has a new grandchild. Those are connected to the outside. I'm so worried about next month's rent. That's connected to the outside. I'm so excited about my trip next week. The emotion that is only possible in the moment is joy, because it comes like a spring and it just comes up through you and it just is. Joy is a response to something that has no other way of expressing. Everybody knows what it feels like, but when you try to express it, there's no other way you can describe it except it's joyful. It was joy. I had this joy. And joy is not because something was accomplished or something is going to happen. Joy is because that precise moment has no other way of description except being joy. I love it. I just love it. So if that's all that's real is this moment, then joy is the most real emotion. Essence said one time to a young woman who said, I want to be on the path and I want to be enlightened, and Essence said, follow your joy. That's my website, followjoy.com. She said, follow your joy. Joy is the breadcrumbs through the forest to enlightenment. When you celebrate your joy, when you know what it feels like, when you allow it to just consume you, and you feel it through every part of your being, then you want more of that. And when you want more of that, you start looking for things that bring you that. Service brings you joy. There's nothing so joyful as realizing you have done something for someone else that made their life better. Nurturing yourself brings you joy. I don't know a single mother or wife who hasn't at some point or another laid in a bubble bath and said, oh, at last. That's treating yourself, giving you the opportunity for joy. Joy is that emotion that when it bubbles up out of you, everybody around you gets splashed with the overflow. Think about the last time you saw someone who was so excited, so joyful. They don't have to share it with you. They can't not share it with you. You can't not feel that when someone is experiencing that. Joy is the baseline of what you want to be. We weren't here, Essence said one time, you've got it all wrong. You weren't put here to learn how to leave. You weren't put here to prove anything. You were put here to experience the wonder and the joy of your spiritual self. And how many people do we know who will not allow themselves that? I have relatives who will not be named because this is on tape, but they know who they are. who really feel like it's not a Christian thing to feel joy. It's all about sacrifice and suffering and I come here from a totally different perspective. So I'm starting you out on this emotion thing, saying, go with the good stuff. Now, this time of year, how many of you are gardeners? This group has got to have some gardeners. Yeah. I'm not even raising my hand because I have a purple thumb, Everything not only dies, but it dies horribly. Really. It's a long, slow progression, and I'm out there trying, to give a plant CPR, and it doesn't work. But one of my favorite flowers or plants is peonies, or for those of you who prefer peonies, which I never heard that till I moved up here. And the thing I like about them is they're so reliable. You can't hardly kill them. They're beautiful, they smell good. And I always know where not to dig up, because when they die, they leave those little, the stuff's left behind. So I know where they're at. So then I can go start looking first thing in the spring when the snow's gone. Are they coming up yet? Are they coming up yet? Well, one thing about that whole process is it reminds me of it's joyful. I look and I see these little red things coming up, and I'm like, yes, they're back. I didn't kill them. They didn't freeze. They're there. I mean, they are indestructible. People told me hostas were, but the deer didn't hear that. So I had hostas at my house. I've been in that house for 40 years, and every year these hostas would come up. I didn't plant them, so I just left them alone because I didn't want to kill them. And everybody said, well, how come the deer don't eat your hostas? I said, I think it's because they're so close to the house, Well, they would mow them down, But a year ago, we had this really wet winter, you remember? And that ground got really wet, and the deer destroyed my hostas because it was so damp and the ground was so soft, they pulled them up by the roots. That was all that, So there's a bare spot now, which I'm probably going to plant peonies. They're my friend. That's a little bit like joy. In the spring, we have this fabulous profusion of flowers and all this wonderful stuff to appreciate. I go out there and I start looking for what survived, what's still here. My son's been trying to grow rhubarb since he was 13. When he was 12, he had a brain tumor. And most of you know that who know me. And we were told that he wouldn't live. Well, he did, but after the initial surgery, they said he had 3 to 5 years. Now, this kid is not dumb. He never asked the doctor, what's going to happen if this radiation doesn't kill? And I said to him, what do I say to David when he says, what if this radiation doesn't work? The doctor said, Lynda, he's not going to ask you that. And he never did, because he knew. But he found all these other ways to find out what I was thinking. He decided he wanted to put in a garden. I said, okay, great. What do you want? Well, let's make I'm like, this kid's going to die. I'm going to do anything. So we laid out this plat, and he starts telling me what he wants to put in there. And pretty soon I said, well, I think this is a good time to take a break. I need a cup of coffee. And I went in the bathroom and cried for about 20 minutes, because every single plant or flower, every single thing that he wanted in this garden was something that would not be harvested the first year. He wanted to know, am I going to be around in 2 years? Rhubarb, asparagus, stuff that took 2 years. Is that dumb? He has still been trying, and this year, for the first time, he has rhubarb. So he says to me the other day, well, I guess I can die now. And I said, don't you dare. But that's the essence of my son. He tells people all the time, dream bigger dreams. Expect bigger things. He's not here today, and I'm saying this to everybody, so I don't have to say it to each person individual, because he spent 3 days in the hospital this past week with 3 small strokes. He's back to baseline. He's doing really well. As a matter of fact, the home care OT person came yesterday, and she was sitting outside at the driveway in her car, And David said, she's here already. She could come in. I said, well, go out and tell her. So he goes out and he said, she almost had a heart attack because she was expecting, she had read his chart, which says at age 11 he had a pinealoma, he had all this brain surgery, he had radiation, he had supposed to die, didn't die. 4 years ago he had another tumor, had a stroke. And she's reading this. And all of a sudden this guy walks out and says, hi, you could come on in. Mom's making coffee. That's my Yoda, that's David. They're so shocked that he's back to baseline already that nobody can explain it. But that's fine because nobody can explain why his tumor just miraculously went away when he was 11 either. One of the things that the pediatric neurologist told me when David continued to thrive when he was 11 and 12 and 13, and then at age 14, when they did an MRI and it was gone, just flat out gone, the neurologist said to me, he is the most perfect example of mind over matter I've ever seen. He said he has refused to be overcome by this. So when he had a tumor 4 years ago, and a stroke, I mean, the stroke was caused by, as the doctor put it, a rather large mass. This is honest to God truth. David and I laughed and said, we've already done this, you know. But he recovered extremely well from that, and the people in rehab wanted him to go talk to people at Courage Center who were, you know, and speak about how he had made this miraculous recovery. And he said, I don't really know how. He said, I just have never, I've always just assumed I would. That I would just take whatever was, and whatever was would be good. I wish I could do that. I can't. I'm getting better. I told him he's going to have to stick around long enough to teach me to do that. But I have learned a lot from him, and I've learned a lot from 35 years of channeling the essence energy, which says, don't judge something as being a tragedy. If you name it, you know, in the Native American community, it took them a long time to, and in a lot of indigenous communities, they don't name a baby right away. Some of them have names picked out way far ahead, but they don't name, they wait to see, you know, who this child is before they give him a name. And David said, don't name tragedy because the name sticks. If he had said, I've had a stroke and isn't that awful and I'm going to have to give up all this stuff and I'm not going to be able to live a good life and blah, 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 that's what he would have been creating. I'm a coach. He took one of my first lessons as a coach and has adapted it as his mantra. What's possible from this place? Wherever you are is where you are. And what's possible from here? There, you know, as a coach, I learned that the most useless question, the most dead-end question is why. Don't ever ask why. Something happens, you know, the only reason to ask why is because you want to blame somebody. You know, whose fault is this? I learned not to do that with my kids because I remember one day I was opening up a box of cereal. The kids were getting up in the morning, and I'm opening up a box of cereal. And you know how sometimes you can't get those inner wrappers? And I ripped it, and I had cornflakes all over the floor. And I set the box down, and I'm looking at this, and one of my kids, who thankfully I've forgotten which one, came in and looked at it and said, Donald did it. And I thought, well, that would help if I needed somebody to blame. And so it became a catchphrase in our family. If something happens that you just don't want to deal with, Donald did it. But, I mean, it just made it clear to me how ridiculous it is to try and blame somebody for something. So if something happens, why is a dumb question. The question to ask is, what now? What's possible from this place? I was fortunate enough to be out of the country for January, February, and March. I was not here for the inauguration or the march or the resistance or any of this stuff that's going on. I didn't get home till the first week in April. And I came back, and I will tell you, I was shocked by the energy that just was overwhelmingly negative. Nobody had a positive word to say about anything. Nothing. I come from a place that says, follow joy. There's got to be a positive to this thing. About 2 years ago, I did a group channeling, and the subject came up of the energy that was moving. And what Essence said was, it's like you have this serene pond, spring-fed pond, and it looks all serene on the surface. But everything that's not working or everything that's not good, you're shoving down in there, and it plugs up the spring. And she said, now there's an energy moving in this world that is about to pop that gunk plug out. Think about a plugged up drain. She said, underneath the surface is really sucky. This energy has pushed that plug up to the surface. For a purpose. For a purpose this is happening, people. That's what we need to look at. It's happening for a reason. It didn't just happen because we all went crazy suddenly and pulled the wrong lever. It's happening for a reason. Everything that we are seeing on either side of the fence, I just spent 3 days with my relatives in Wisconsin who were celebrating like crazy because Trump won. I spent a dinner with my daughter and her daughter who are in mourning because Hillary lost. They're both nuts. Neither group is thinking straight because they're both coming from a negative place. They're both coming from despair on one side and unbelievably glee on the other side. And nobody is looking at what's possible from this place. Now I'm talking about joy. I'll tell you, I got back here the 1st of April. There's no joy in Mudville. None. And it really broke my heart. Because there's all this energy that's being wasted asking why. Every time I see another commentator or another article about why Hillary lost, I want to scream, who cares why? This is where we are. What's possible from this place? And what's possible from this place is to look at all that crap that's floating on the top of the pond now. And as Essence said, the reason it's coming up is so you can see it and change it. So when that's happening in your life, and I would bet you that there are places in your life that is happening, something's coming up. I got my thing going with my family. It was a good thing I was gone for 3 months. But it's coming up so you can look at it and decide what you want to do about it, other than try to figure why. It doesn't matter why. Everything happens for a reason. This didn't just happen because somebody went crazy. We live in a purposeful universe. If that hadn't been meant to happen, it wouldn't have happened. I trust that we are being called to create a better vision. I've got a little Post-it note on my computer now, and I don't remember exactly what it says, but something to the effect that the way to create a new vision is not to beat down the past, but to create a new vision. What do you want now? There's no going back. You can't go back and get a redo. So what are we going to do now that's positive and productive? What are we learning about ourselves on both sides of the aisle? the Republicans and the Democrats. I can say that because I've voted both parties all my life. You know, I split my ticket all the time. I try to pay attention to the individual, you know, offices in my community, and I can't be this or this. I'd like to think I'm a sentient human being who tries to feel where is the positive energy and follow that line. Joy is the key to that. How many of you have had any moment of unadulterated joy since the election? Yeah. Hang on to that. Your world didn't end in November. And you build on that. Joy is the breadcrumbs to enlightenment. How do you find more joy? You look at what brought you joy, and then you ask yourself, how do I get more of that in my life? I don't know anybody except someone who's extremely mentally ill who gets any joy out of ripping at somebody else and tearing them down. You might get some real gut satisfaction out of it, but it's like whiskey. Feels good now. You're going to have a hangover in the morning. It's about where can I put my energy in service to the whole, to acknowledge and affirm that I'm connected, I am one, I am part of this. Joy is in the moment. Be present in the moment. Let go of November, let go of January, let go of anything that hasn't brought you joy, and ask yourself, what's my job here? What is my job? What are you here for? As it says, you're not here to learn to leave, and you're not here to suffer. One time she told a woman, she said, that sounds very self-sacrificing. And the woman says, well, yeah, I try to put everybody else first. And as it said, self-sacrifice is still sacrifice, and that's so Old Testament. She says, she really is challenging people at the present time, and I think this joy thing is all part of it, to stand in your own truth. Find out what's true for you and live from that place. Where's your joy? I don't see any joy in marching for anything unless you're marching in support of something lifting up. Protest marches, to me, are like running yourself through a meat grinder. There's a better way to use that energy. I've used this example before in my own life. I used to do a newspaper, and we were going to do a series on environmental illness. You know, people who are really extremely sensitive to carpet, the stuff in your carpet or the paint and stuff like that. And every single person that I interviewed for that article was so negative and so depressed and depressing and judgmental. And it's like I left thinking, it's taken me a long time to realize that I really am an empath. I do really feel what they're feeling. That my sense that they were all caught up in their illness was real, and they couldn't see anything positive. It was, and it just was a spiral down and down and down. For some of them, stuff that had not bothered them before they started talking about environmental illness started bothering them. Now, I'm not saying that's everybody, but I'm saying it was a huge number of them. And I could not, in writing a newspaper titled Positive Flow, I could not take that tag. So what I end up doing is trying to turn it around and find the positive aspect of this. So I ended up doing a whole monthly newspaper that went around to different places that provided environmentally friendly paints, that, home furnishings, carpeting, that sort of stuff, where they were coming from a place of trying to recognize it and solve it. Where could those people go that get stuff that would help them? And you know what? I got about 4 or 5 of the people that I interviewed called me and said, That was a ridiculous article. I'm not going to any of those places. Nothing's going to help me. And I said, you said it, because you don't want to be helped. As a coach, one of the things I've learned, first thing I learned is there are people you can't coach. If they don't want something to change, there's nothing I can do to make them change. Somebody with coaching clients will say to me, "Oh, you changed my life." I said, "No, I held your coat while you changed your life." But you have to want to. And so I'm challenging you, all of you, today, to want more joy in your life. These last few months have been hard. The way to change that energy is to change that energy. It all starts with you. You can find a place in your life that's joyful. If you want to go, it shouldn't be hard on a day like today to find some place that makes you feel joyful and surrender to it. That's the thing. Don't question it. Don't say, well, this would be a really good day if it was, if there was a party, or if there was, this is a really good day. Go find out why, And even if nobody else is having a good day, you can have a good day. You're entitled. As I said, the minute you look at something and say, I can make this work, it's work. My grandson came over yesterday because David was really worried about the yard. The grass is growing and he can't mow and blah, blah, blah. So my grandson came over, and he's a yuppie's kid. His father is an attorney and a vice president of one of the divisions of Tyco. He has 250 attorneys who work for him. I don't tell everybody that, so don't share that. But his kid is about what you would expect. He's really spoiled rotten. And he also has Asperger's, and I love him dearly. Love him, love him, love him. And some of you have heard this, but he's the one who, when I said to him one time when he was 6, I love you, Ben. He said, I know, Grandma, you're the one who loves me all the time. So I got back from Italy, and it was like fabulous, and then I discovered that my darling grandson has left home and is living with my daughter in Minnetonka. So that's until the school year's out, and we'll see what happens then, and I'm really trying to keep a joyful perspective on that. But he came over to mow my lawns, and he has had I said, how much experience do you have mowing lawn, Ben? And he looked at me and he goes, none. So he said, but I'm a quick learner. So David got him started, and he's mowing. And he said, man, it's really hard making this work. I said, it's really hard when you make it work. I said, is there any way you could make this joyful? He looked at me like I'm crazy. He goes, huh? I said, yeah. If you laid this out in your mind and you pictured every one of those dandelions was something you didn't like in the world, and when you go through and mow that, they're all washed. And he starts laughing. And I said, or you could look at this as all your homework that you've got to get in. You could look at that way. I said, you could find a million ways that you could get all this out of you in a positive way by just whipping through there. And he went like a madman. He got the whole thing done. And then I took him to pick up his tux for the prom, and he's all hot and sweaty. But he got done, and he said, I don't believe that was so much fun. I said, when did it start being fun? I said, first couple rounds, you hated it. When did it start being fun? And he said, well, when I didn't see that it was work anymore. So that's my challenge to you. In what's going on in your lives, what's going on in the world, stop seeing it as work. Where's the fun? Where's the joy? Joy is so powerful. It absolutely, studies of people, the endorphins and all of this from joy are so healing, so positive. And the more you experience joy, the more you can connect to it. Now, the flip side of that, joy, sorrow. My son just had three little strokes on Monday. The joy is that he shocked the heck out of the OT person who expected that she was going to have to get somebody else to help her get him in the shower after reading his chart. And she came in and she said, I can't, this is really hard to believe. I said, did you ever see Star Wars? She goes, well, yeah. I said, you remember that part where you don't believe it, so you can't see it? I said, start expecting this. On your next call, expect that it's going to be better. Expect that you're going to be pleasantly surprised instead of preparing yourself for the worst. Essence says you don't always get what you want, but you always get what you expect. You can walk around all day and say, I want this, I want this, I want this. And if in your deepest being, you're saying, and of course I won't get it. Of course you won't get it. David tells everybody, dream bigger dreams. You've got to dream beyond what you've dreamed before. There's joy there. There's joy in the process. It opens you up to it. Is there sorrow? Absolutely there is. Absolutely. So I want to share with you. I have two poets who I really revere a lot. Rumi and Gibran. I'm sure most of you have heard of these guys. And so it's really funny because I went to Goodwill to donate some stuff yesterday, and David was wanting to look for a belt. And I came across, I must have given away 700 copies of this book. And walked into Goodwill, and it was on a shelf for $1.99. And I picked it up. And it says, it's a Christmas gift to someone, 1977. To two beautiful people, Carter and Jan, for an even more beautiful life together, Dad and Mom. How neat is that? They gave them this. This is a quote from Rumi, because when I'm doing my newsletter and I want to find, I go to, quotes about this or quotes about that, and I always learn something. What Rumi says is, sorrow prepares you for joy. And in reading this, I thought about my peonies. It violently sweeps everything out of your house so that new joy may enter. It shakes yellow leaves from the bough of your heart so that fresh green leaves can grow in their place. It pulls up the rotten roots so that new roots, hidden below, have room to grow. Whatever sorrow shakes from your heart, far better things will take their place. I have a kid who survived a terminal brain tumor, miraculously, who has now recovered to an amazing degree from a massive stroke 4 years ago. Fought like a tiger to get disability and finally has it, and is now telling me we can be retired together. We work well together, Mother. Let's be retired together. And his doctor has said to him, you compensated incredibly from the stroke from your brain tumor at 11, but this stroke is something you can't compensate for. That's the message he got. You can't compensate for this. You're not going to be, and this kid is a brilliant National Merit Scholar. So he knows what he's lost. He knows what he can't do. I'm getting old, and I'm resentful of the stuff that I can't do that I used to do. It's like, I want to be, I've got a brace on my foot. I want to be able to walk. I want to be able to run. He's telling me that he wants to get a particular bicycle because it'll be easier for him to ride. He's constantly creating joy in his life. He bought the craziest hat in Italy. I mean, he looks like a mafioso. I mean, a short mafioso, but a short mafioso. He's constantly dreaming bigger dreams. He doesn't miss a minute of joy in his life. And he is constantly and consistently sharing that. He had this occupational therapist laughing hysterically when I left over some joke that he was telling her. I could feel the energy. I could feel how this experience that she had dreaded had become positive for her. And that feeds him. Joy begets joy. Find the smallest piece of joy, hang on to it and share it, and it's like Johnny Appleseed. You plant that out there, you never know. I always like to say Johnny Appleseed never ate one of those apples off of the trees that he planted, but he knew they were out there. That's what David does. He just spreads joy all over. And he never, ever lets go of that. His intention for this year is the same as it was last year. I want to live a life of joyful abundance and share from my overflow. Works for me. He could be, this same day that he came home from the hospital, one of my mother's sisters died. She's 6 years older than I am. We were like this growing up. And she has been so negative for the last few years. Her husband died, and she just was really mad at God. And this woman signed herself into hospice and didn't eat. And she died on Wednesday. And I thought, that's a choice. It was a choice she made. And I have to honor that. But man, I wish she had chosen something different. I miss her. You are all at choice as to what you allow in your life. Don't label something. She lost her husband, and she labeled that as a tragedy, and she took on this role that she could not take care of herself, and she was nobody. And I wished to God that she had got some help or some counseling or something, and her kids tried to get her to. No. She decided then and there that was it, that was the end. And she has a right to do that. And you all have a right to do that. But my grandmother's, I had a really amazing grandmother who said to me one time, the hardest thing in the world to remember is that there are the same 60 seconds in a happy minute as there are in a sad minute. It always seems like the sad ones are so much longer. And a few weeks ago, I said to someone, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And then in the back of my head, I hear Essence saying, well, that's the point, isn't it? You go through it. You don't get stuck there. You're going to have sadness. You're going to have sorrow. You're going to have anger. You're going to have all those other emotions. Move on. Move on. Don't stay there. You can change it. And the only way you can change it is if you dream a bigger dream. This is what Gibran says. Some of you say joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. I have a living example of that in my house every day. I have a kid who exudes joy because it's the choice he makes again and again and again. I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Choose joy. Follow joy. Experience joy. Share joy, because you're living in this moment. And it's only in this moment that you can really, truly experience joy. Now, joyfully get ready to put some money into the coffers. I want to thank you all for being here today. It's always a joy for me to be here. And I want to share something that I had a Southern Baptist grandmother who used to teach my sisters and I to sing all the old Baptist hymns because it drove my Catholic mother nuts. No passive aggressive there. And one of the ones that particularly drove her nuts was almost like 99 bottles of beer on the wall, because it goes on forever and you can't shut it up. And that was, I have that joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart. And we would sing that day and night because we knew it, because we could sing it, because it drove my mother nuts, basically. But one time, my mother, we said to her, why does this bother you so much? She said, it's just so repetitious. She said, you ought to know that you have joy. And I said, well, how do we know that? And my mother was not what I would think of as a philosophical person, but she said to me, joy is the one thing that never leaves you. She said, you get over being mad, you get over being sad, you get over being worried, but she said, you never get over being joyful. So she said, you do have it down in your heart, and it's always there when you need it. So this is how I want to leave you, knowing that when you're in the very worst place you can possibly be, you cannot be joyless, because it is part of your soul. It's always there. Reach for it, ask for it, and it feeds everything else. God bless. Thank you.